stink eyes from the mayor. I decided it's time to come out.
We were going to start without you. Yeah, I think it's time to start. Let's do the roll call.
Here.
Councilman Leonard. Here. Mayor Potemporary Duper.
Present.
Mayor Rigsby.
Here.
Councilman Popescu is absent. There is a quorum.
Thank you. The invocation and Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Councilman Leonard. Please stand.
Father in heaven, we thank you once again for your watch care over us. We pray that you will be with us here in this meeting tonight as we discuss some various issues important to the city, that you will help guide us into the correct plan of action. In Jesus' name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any items to be added or deleted?
No, sir.
Would the public like to speak on any items not agendized? I have no written requests. Any movement? I don't see any. Then what I'd like to do is dispense with the items that are not item 1 so that I can exit, because I won't be here for item 1. So we're going to go to item number 2, demands register.
I'll move it. Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Any opposition? I hear no opposition, so that's approved unanimously. In the interest of completing the other agendas, I will open the Housing Authority agenda. Are there any items to be added or deleted on that?
No, sir.
Any reports from the public? Comments on non-agendized items? Seeing none, the consent calendar is there.
Second.
Any discussion? Is there any opposition to it? I hear no opposition, so that's approved unanimously. Are there any member reports? Any reports of officers? Then the Housing Authority is adjourned. Next is the successor agency to the redevelopment agency. Are there any items to be added or deleted?
No, sir.
Any comments from the public on items not on the agenda? No takers. The consent calendar.
Move it.
I heard a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Any opposition? Hearing none, it's approved. That agenda is adjourned, and we go back to the City Council, and we have item 1 that I am conflicted from, as is Councilman Popescu, who's not here anyway. So I will wish you well, and I will hand my trusty hammer.
You can leave it. I've got it up, but yeah.
This is the authority of them.
Let's see if I can actually get it over there. I may need it.
You can have it. Without it, you're powerless. Okay.
All right. Enjoy your evening.
Okay, this is a public hearing to process an addendum to the program environmental impact report for what's commonly known as Campus Transformation Plan. Natalie Patty from Lilburn Corporation will be here to give the presentation. But before we start, I wanted to give a little bit of clarification and some framework on this. This is specifically the environmental impact report to the entire Campus Transformation Plan. And what this is the environmental impact report that you approved, and I believe it was in January 14. So about a year and a half ago. And all we're looking at is the massing, the size of the proposed building, some additional parking spaces, and the change from 750 to about 1 million square feet, and some changes in the room count. What we're not looking at is any of the specifics as, although you're going to see some fairly high-end renderings, what we're not looking at is the specifics of the building, the siding, anything that has anything to do with the specific construction of the building. What we really are is looking kind of what's going to go under that dome of the environmental and the master plan of that.
So can you give us succinctly again what we're looking for? We're looking for an increase in square footage and what else?
We're looking for a change in elevation to go from a 13 to a 16-story building, a increase in parking spaces from by about 157, and an additional 11 ambulance parking spaces. And those parking spaces, again, are someplace on the site, to be determined when we get into the specifics of the building. And then a increase in the square footage from about 750,000 square feet to 1 million square feet. And then to essentially accept the bed count as the equivalent to the existing hospital. The change in square footage is primarily related, and Natalie's going to get into that without stealing too much of your thunder, is primarily related to larger spaces per patient, not larger patient counts. Because right now, if you get up into the patient areas, they're double rooms and pretty cozy, and to give a more modern work area and amount of space that's necessary to provide that patient care. All right, with that, I'll get out of the way and let Natalie do her thing.
Good evening, gentlemen. Again, as Conrad has said, we're going to be discussing the changes to the master plan. Guillermo, do we have a slide? And all of the changes basically were able to be addressed within an addendum. So an addendum to the EIR was prepared, and in accordance with CEQA, the addendum didn't need to be circulated. It's just internal. It will be a part of the administrative record. There was no new additional impacts, basically, that needed to be circulated to the public, and an additional comment period opened up at that point. So we're going to give you a description of everything that occurred here. There we go. Again, of course, we're talking about, of course, the master plan covered the entire university, but we're specifically looking at where the new hospital is going to be going, right over here at the corner of Barton and Anderson. It's an existing parking lot now, and there's a number of spaces there now, and of course the EIR addressed putting the new hospital building and maintaining about 80 spaces. And changes to the plans now include being able to maintain 150 spaces. The footprint of the building didn't change, but through just redesign and reconfiguration of the front entrance remodel, and also just aligning of different roadways through this area, we were able to fit in more parking spaces. And this afternoon, I was asked by city staff to call Caltrans to address a comment that they had. They were concerned that the parking spaces were going to generate traffic. And I explained that parking spaces do not generate traffic on their own. So it was something that this area is already currently an existing surface parking lot, and basically being able to maintain more spaces for the university is a plus, and it won't be generating any new traffic. And of course, the existing settings in previous CEQA, this is an existing surface parking lot, and it's zoned healthcare and institutional. The original 2014 EIR prepared and certified for the master plan included a review in the construction of a new 13-story, 732 square foot hospital with 664 beds to replace a portion of the existing hospital on site and include 80 parking spaces. After the completion of the final design of the hospital, the applicant determined that more square footage would be envisioned. So now, of course, we're proposing the modification of the campus transformation plan will include an increase in height from 13 stories to 16. This is basically translates into 54 feet, and an increase in square footage from 732,000 to 1 million, and an increase in surface parking from 80 to 157, and 11 designated ambulance parking spaces. And the applicant is also requesting that they go back to the original currently permitted 719 beds. The EIR looked at reducing this to 650, but again, through evaluating their needs, they determined they'd like to go back to what they basically have been permitted for all these years. And here, of course, is the site plan. We have the new hospital, and with the increase in square footage, they actually didn't have to change the footprint. And I believe the ambulance parking is right here, and of course, front entry and drive aisles will go all the way straight through to Barton Road. And the building massing was one of the things that was included in the addendum, basically going from 13 stories to 16 stories. We wanted to make sure that there were no new impacts. So this is the proposed building massing, and as you can see here, the existing hospital has a total height of 9 stories, and the new hospital would be 16 stories. And the EIR looked at 13 stories. When you get to see a little bit more of the simulations, it'll make a little bit more sense, but there's a couple of more penthouse areas. It's a little bit more open on top. And as for CEQA, of course, as I explained, we prepared an addendum, and it didn't need to be recirculated in accordance with CEQA. And the addendum focused on the minor changes to aesthetics. And it found that there were no new impacts with the proposed changes to the new hospital. And all of the original parameters within the 2014 program EIR for the master plan didn't have any changes, or no new impacts were discovered within that. And here, of course, are some simulations. This is a view of the proposed hospital looking south. If it was a little darker in here, it would show up a little bit better. But as you can see here, the ridge line of the mountains to the north is kind of echoed in the design, but we're not getting into that tonight. We're just looking basically at the height. So as you can see here, the 16 stories looks at more of kind of like smaller kind of penthouse. It's not just simply straight up 16 stories. And here, of course, is the existing hospital. And views looking southwest. Here you get scale of people looking up at the building. And views looking north. And a view looking west. Are there any questions about the addendum or anything that occurred up to that point?
Good job.
Okay, last time you asked to take a look at what the elevation would affect on view in the area. So this green line is essentially the elevation of the existing hospital relative to the hills, south hills. What you can see is basically from Cypress, the top end of Anderson, everything north of Cypress, top end of Anderson, the top end of Lawton Way are the areas that are affected by any type of view change as far as the elevation. These areas north of the green line essentially already have some impact from the view of the hospital. So what we're looking at is somewhere between 40 and 50 homes in this area that will have some limited view impact from the new building. So what I did is I took kind of from Tulip and Astor right here, swung an arc, how much of the view is the hospital and how much view would be the addition. So They're going to go from about a 20-degree view to a 55-degree view. The reality is down in here, most of the houses face east and west, so there's a limited north-south view that would impact anyway, and there's some pretty large trees behind the FMO and some mature vegetation in here, so if you're in one of those houses, you're probably not going to get much impact from the additional, and like I said, you're already getting height impact. All it would be is a wider view of the facility. Step back to Tulip and Lawton, back in here. We went from 15 degrees of view to 35 degrees of view. Once again, everything north of Lawton is probably east-west. There isn't too many places that have north-south views. Once you get south of Lawton, then there's a couple houses in here and along here that have north-south views. The remainder, are still primarily east-west views throughout. And then I took two from the top of Anderson Way. These, right where the kind of line hits, we go from 8 degrees to 24 degrees with that arc. And as soon as you start getting sideways a little bit out, because you're already looking at the building sideways, you're not losing that much additional view in those areas. And like I said, the only places that will have any type of view impact are these houses in here and these houses in here. Was over on Cypress on the weekend and kind of looked out, and you really are kind of level from Cypress Street with the house, and kind of it really isn't, from a perspective, kind of standing back, it's about a 3-finger thickness of view from that area. And that is, let's take it back to that one work for questions, discussion. And the applicant is here to answer any additional questions, and it is open to...
I don't know why, but Tower of Babel keeps going through my head.
So the additional square footage is coming from adding 3 more stories on the building, I assume?
It's coming from adding 3 stories, and the stories are fairly large areas on penthouse, open area. Apparently they're going to have some meeting space up on the top floor. So the height comes, from larger, that top floor, larger than normal story as well.
I'm a little uncomfortable that CEQA doesn't require this to go back to the public, and this is only considered a minor change. And I personally don't relish the thought of sitting here 3 years, 4 years from now and having upset, angry citizens and wondering how we could have allowed a skyscraper to be built in the middle of our quiet town.
Well, when the original EIR was circulated, there were no comments ever received on the 13 stories. And simulations were prepared and it was looked at, and views from all around were also looked at. CEQA, believe it or not, actually doesn't even take into account the minimal amount of residents that it would be affecting. It looks at it as a grander scale. What view sheds will we be blocking? How long will we be blocking them? People driving along Barton Road won't be able to see San Bernardino Peak, let's say, or San Gorgonio Peak for maybe 3 or 5 seconds. It's not substantial as far as environment or CEQA goes. As far as the analysis, when we looked at it for the 13 stories that it would be, the impacts were considered less than significant because, one, this city for the most part and its general plan supports the university, supports it being here, and it's actually iconic. So the EIR actually kind of discussed kind of supporting that. In addition to that, with the impacts being less than significant, it looked at impacts from the west, which are single-family residential, and which were found to be, again, less than significant. But most of the other view sheds basically south of Barton, north of where this building is going to be, and west of this building is all university. It's surrounded basically by university itself. So regionally, aesthetically, it's not a significant impact. And again, for the residences adjacent to it, it was also found less than significant. When you go up 3 more stories or 54 feet, there's not a lot to find additional impacts within those 4 feet. You're not adding to a new impact or creating a new impact, and that's where CEQA finds that an addendum is okay to do.
So what happens 6 months from now when we revise the plan and decide we want to go up another 2.5 stories?
When you want to go up another 2.5 stories,
No,
it would
I'm asking
have to
what
be
happens.
it would have to be looked at again. I would have to be
And
supplied.
again, because that's a minimal amount compared to the 16, then we don't have to do the full CEQA again?
It would be looked at, and it would be determined from staff what would be considered
You
significant.
know, there's letter of the law, which is what you're hired to examine and to analyze, and then there's also spirit of the law, which is the community and the people that live here. And so that doesn't necessarily address that.
Well, from what I understand, we did what is required with CEQA and let them know of this public hearing tonight. And I'm also aware of a scoping meeting with the surrounding neighborhood. They were also informed of and saw what the building is going to look like as well. And it was welcome to everybody in the community.
I guess
And we also don't have anybody here from the public to speak on it, which, I mean, that not necessarily defending that, but at the same time, they were welcome to come to that community hearing and to see what the university was proposing. They were also welcomed to come to the EIR at that time when it was certified back in January 2014, and they were welcomed here tonight. It's basically being surrounded by its own zoning, being within its own institutional zoning. It's not something that's popping up in the middle of nowhere, and this has been the university since the turn of the century.
I don't know that that's a fair statement to say.
No, I mean,
To
but
be quite honest with you.
I hope it's not unfair, because it's about the one I was going to make, which is nobody's sneaking this up.
nobody's sneaking it up.
This has been under discussion openly for years now, and there's a big hole in the ground and big equipment out there, and to my recollection, we've never had any complaints from the public on this in this council, and that's pretty unusual. I mean, we have much less controversial structures that go up that we hear plenty about.
Well, to speak to Mayor Pro Tempore Duper's comment, is the initial EIR, I shoot myself in the eye, essentially covered everything below the green line. So the only new impacts are the guys above the green line. The original EIR addressed everything in here, and the elevation change only has those about 40 houses.
But you can see his point. I agree with him in the sense that there's a 25-ish% increase. And I mean, in a thought experiment, I always like to do thought experiments. And the thought experiment would be you start out with a 3-story, and then you say, oh, that's all approved. We're only adding 2 stories, so that's all approved. And then you just creeping. Before too long, you have Trump Tower here, you know. And I can see the point he's trying to make is, I don't know. It seems like that's kind of a big jump, but
It's twice. It's almost twice. Your existing hospital is 9 stories, and we're going.
But I mean, from what was originally approved, from 13 to 16?
No. From 13 to 16 is a small, but what I'm saying is we're enlarging quite a bit. I'm actually pretty proud to drive down the 10 freeway leaving Ukaipa, and you can right away spot the medical center, and you go, wow, that's Loma Linda, because you can see it. And we can see a 9-story building from that far out. And my concern is we're going to have this humongous, just, you know, in-your-face structure that seems to be getting higher and higher and higher. And it in a way, it takes away the feeling of our community, which is a modest, quiet, homey community. And I'm not against it. I'm just pointing out some of the things that are obvious to me. And you know, also with increased size comes increased demand on resources and things like that, which is always in the back of my mind. So I'm just throwing out my thoughts. It's not an indication of how I'm going to vote, but you never know.
To address your thought on the increased resources, the existing hospital, I believe, is 917 beds. Is that 719? 719, and the new hospital will be 719. So, although it's a larger square footage, it's no additional resources.
Well, it actually is, because we're going to use the old hospital for outpatient clinics and things like that. So that's not a fair statement either.
The point where
point
we
is we're
address
growing.
that is, and it sounds like we're kicking the can down the road, and we are. But
Hopefully we address that at some point down the road.
when that building becomes to repurpose, then this discussion will cover those impacts, and it is a valid point.
And again, I have to make this a point. I'm not anti-university by any means or anti-medical center by any means. However, growingly and increasingly, more and more of the administrators of the medical center live elsewhere other than this city. And I live in this town, and when everybody else goes home at the end of the day, I still live here, as well as my neighbors and other people in my community. So as much as the medical center and university are tied to the city of Loma Linda, they don't dominate the city of Loma Linda. We still have a community to serve, and I need to make sure that we're constantly thinking about that.
And I agree with you. And you know, the change actually affects my view. So when I get up in the morning, I get to see a building I didn't get to see before. Yes.
Obviously, down the road, we talk about coverings and things like that. But from some of the artist renditions, I mean, that seems like a lot of glass. So increasing this, you know, and it's changed quite a bit from when we looked at it just a few months ago. But that right there, if indeed that's, and I realize this is just some sketching, but I mean, that seems like that reflects a lot of light out, especially with all those angles. And I'm not a physics major, but
Two parts. First, there is a great deal of glass in here. A lot of it is, if I understand correctly, and the architects will throw something at me if I'm off, that a lot of it is refractory, so that it kind of diffuses the light and doesn't create the London issue where you fry cars in the parking lot. This is panels in front of glass, so it's not exposed glass. And then, you know, the second piece, we really, although it's pertinent, what we're really looking at tonight is the massing of the building.
Explain this to me, because you said something before and it kind of went past me and I didn't quite catch it. You said that something to the effect of, although there's more parking spaces, that won't increase traffic. And I guess I don't understand that, because it seems like you're putting more parking spaces in so you can have more cars parked.
Well,
so I guess I'm not.
It's currently a parking spot.
What's that?
It's currently a parking lot.
it's actually a hole right now. It's not currently a parking lot.
Yeah, but how many spaces were on that?
From a theoretical standpoint, the use generates the traffic. So if you have so many patient beds or restaurant stalls or bedrooms, that generates a traffic use. A parking lot is ancillary and supportive to that. So if, you know, to take your thought experiment, if we built a parking lot in the middle of the desert, there wouldn't be any traffic going to it because there's no purpose for the parking lot. So
I guess then I would guess, why would you build the parking lot? Because I wouldn't build it in the desert. So there's a reason why you're building 4 parking structures, right? You wouldn't build them unless you're expecting cars to fill them up. So I guess I'm just not understanding that.
The purpose for the parking structures is you will be removing, God, I keep going the wrong way. You will be removing at some point all of this surface parking and this surface parking. You know, all this stuff becomes building. So to take what's existing here, we need to find a new home for it. And that is the purpose for the parking structure here.
Well, then what about the new parking structure by the outpatient
For the
surgery center?
FMO, that's to deal with FMO issues. They have some parking issues related to the FMO. They're at maximum use for their parking size, so any expansion, any addition, they're limited to that. And they also have some ADA compliance issues as far as slopes in the parking lot and what they can do, that they can't even do any more remodeling internally to the building to change suites or anything until they resolve their parking issue on site. So that's part of the reason for that parking structure. And the other part of the reason is that during the course of construction, there will be, construction guys there.
No, I understand.
That will have a traffic impact. So that those guys, it's cheaper for the contractor to build a parking structure and abandon it than to pay these guys to be bussed in and out from some parking lot on a remote site.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying that it's not going to be abandoned, so I'm just questioning the statement. Excess parking structure spaces don't increase traffic. I just
We're
don't
actually
getting it.
we're actually talking about a purpose for that because we're being asked to go back to the original bed count from 630 to back to 719. So some of that additional parking is going to be required because of that increase, which would also increase traffic. Right? So, I mean, Caltrans in a sense is right. It does increase a little bit because you're talking about an increase in patient count. I get it. That's what we already have right now. But it's going to be a rough couple of years during construction and some of the other stuff. It really is for everybody.
It will increase patient count from what was proposed under the previous ER, but it will not increase patient count from where we sit today. And the parking traffic argument is an interesting argument, and I don't know that, to be fair, and I know the planners are going to tell me I'm all wrong, to be fair, that there may not be some impacts to where if you're not generating new parking or new traffic, you are at the very least redistributing the existing traffic that's going to existing parking lots by putting them someplace else.
Which is a traffic
Which
condition
does,
in itself.
is a traffic condition.
There have been traffic impact analysis done for all of the other parking structures, which looked at redistribution, people traveling to that site versus where they used to go. And there were mitigation measures at that time when those went through and we were evaluating them, and those will be done by the applicant.
We are doing traffic for the building itself, right?
Mm-hmm. So there has been traffic impact analysis done.
I think probably what would happen is all the people that park throughout the neighborhood now will park in the parking structure, and then when that fills up, all the people will park back in the neighborhood. So eventually, it's going to be more traffic. I stand by my statement.
I'm going to meet you halfway and say it will redistribute traffic, and it's probably a fair bet that the guys that are parking here and out here will end up aggregating here.
Well, we put up a couple of new structures. One is just barely being used, but when we put up the other parking lot, the traffic sure increased. I go there every day, so it did increase. So maybe it did decrease somewhere else in the city, up by Lawton where people were parking or something.
And it may have pulled parking and traffic from Lot X and from the other side of Anderson.
Right.
And because it pulled little bits and pieces from other areas, you don't notice as much as that aggregated traffic in one place.
Right.
All right. So what's the direction we need to?
You need to open the public hearing.
All right. Feels so wrong touching the mayor's gavel. All right, I'm going to open the public hearing. Anyone who wishes to speak on the topic is invited forward. We would love to hear from you. Hold the mic down, maybe.
Dick Wiley, as a couple of questions. You've got a square building. from the way it is looking, we are looking at a lot of surface space from the people on the south side looking north. And you've got several columns in there. If you're looking to have columns for window space, what happens if you put it in a square with an open center? What I'm thinking about, in other words, if you're looking for the people's view, then instead of going this way, head on, turn it sideways. There's more visibility through the building maybe, or between these towers. And if that is the case where you're looking for just window space so you can see out, that's why I say, well, you could lower it and then put rooms on the inside or a little more space there.
I'm not sure that the design is within our purview to actually address. So, I mean, the only thing we can really discuss is the mass and the height.
Well, even if it's a square building, that whole model could be moved and you haven't changed the building. It's just the configuration when it's set down.
Other than that, what do you think? You like the project?
Don't like the height. You know, we're starting to get into blocks, walls, and that kind of thing. To me, it's too high.
Anyone else?
I just wanted to add a couple comments. I'm sorry, Eric Schilt from the Medical Center. The primary rationale for the increased height, and I know you talked about this, was really primarily driven by that bed count. And our goal with such a tight site was to try to be as efficient as possible. If there was the opportunity on our site from the initial concept of design to potentially go more to go shorter and take up more land space, I'm sure we would have pursued that. Actually, it presents some more simple solutions from a structural perspective than what we currently have. But the primary goal is to essentially try to provide close to what we really currently have from a licensed bed count perspective and continue to provide that level of service to the community and all of the patient population that we support. So I completely understand the concerns associated with the increased elevation. I just wanted to primarily comment on that fact and also note that from a time frame perspective, there was a couple comments about what happens when we add a couple more floors and a couple more floors. This project probably has been identified before as being primarily driven by state legislation to comply with seismic standards. And at this point, our schedule and where we sit in it currently will not allow us to make those sort of modifications and still hit our seismic deadlines. So though I don't have authority to say we would never under any circumstances add any additional floors, I could almost certainly say as a medical center representative that will not occur at this point in order for us to make sure we hit our seismic state deadline. So just wanted to add those couple of points of perspective. We actually, even in our licensed bed count, even in the increased height, is actually still going to be fewer than the 719. Our final licensed bed count configuration will be up to 693. So it's pretty close to the 719, but it's still a little bit less. So this increase was really just from a concern on the medical center side to not have enough beds to serve the current patient population that we're serving today. And a lot of that is, in terms of talking about the traffic and the additional program, this is truly essentially replacing what we currently have, even though it's hard to envision that due to the size. There's just so much more space required when you in current healthcare design to really deal with what you currently have. The last comment associated with all of the reuse of the building, and this is something Conrad stated, and I just wanted to confirm it because he and I have had several discussions on it. If the medical center knew right now exactly what we were going to be doing with the vacated space, we would already have been moving down that road. But because we're in the planning stages and are not able to say with definition, yes, we will be doing X, Y, and Z, we have acknowledged the fact that any reuse of that building will require us to go through a similar process with the city where we'd say, hey, we're planning to do X. We're planning to put this program in the building. What sort of traffic impact, what sort of parking impact does that have? So though there is an iterative process here when you look at our entire campus. Our goal and our focus is to try to meet that seismic compliance deadline, try to maintain the same level of patient care we're currently providing, and understand that we don't have all of the answers to our existing building, but we will bring those back to the city council, to the city, when we have more definition on those, and we ourselves understand the potential impacts to the campus and the city.
I totally understand, and I applaud the efforts to maintain the current operation size and structure and all that. I do have a real quick question on that.
Sure.
Why didn't we start with the 719 to begin with? Why did we come in at the low?
It primarily was budget. You know, we had also when we did our initial EIR, and part of the inclusion in square footage, though each of those floors represents, I think, approximately 32,000 feet just of program space. A big chunk of the percentage also had to do with the fact that where we were at design and where we were with the design at the time of the original program EIR, we had considered putting all of our mechanical units outside of the primary building, and we ended up including those as a floor within the building. So what that did was it created an additional 100,000. So if you look at the overall square footage, about 100,000 plus of that, slightly over, is actually just mechanical space. It's not programmed function. It's just where we're putting all of our air handlers. So that was an impact. The additional floors was an impact. And when we initially did our program EIR, at that point, based upon the medical center and children's hospitals' financial pro formas, we didn't believe we could afford anything more than that. So we were essentially at that point saying, what's the maximum amount we can build with our current financial trajectory, still trying again to max out the amount of beds we could build, even recognizing we were going to be taking a loss in licensed bed count, and we were looking at strategies for how we were going to deal with that over the course of the next year and two, as the design developed, as financial trajectory and performance indicators changed. Our board felt that we were able to increase our budget and thus increase the amount of beds we could build in the building. So that was the primary driver and the reason why it changed significantly.
Makes sense. All right. Thank you, sir. Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Is that appropriate? Madam Clerk? Oh, I have to close it with the gavel, too. Close the public hearing and open it up for discussion or motion by the council. I can't make the motion, otherwise I would.
I'll make the motion that that we approve modification to PPD 13-018. What else does it require, Pam? Is that adequate? Okay. That's my.
I would just recommend that you base that upon the addendum to the program environmental impact report, and including the changes to the campus transformation plan as presented.
I didn't read enough there. Okay. That was precisely where I was going.
I knew I would say it wrong and get corrected, so I let you get corrected. So, I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion? Anything you want
I don't know. I love this town. When I remember first driving in this town, like the thoughts that you had. I drove here in 1980 when I was going to be a pastor for the first time, and I drove over Barton Road there and came down and saw that, and I said, man, this is a neat little town. And I've never left. I mean, I spent a year doing an internship or something, or when I did my seminary thing. And I just really liked the whole feel of it. And this big thing, I mean, it's good. We need to have it. And I just kind of feel a little sad for the loss of the quaint little town. And I think that's probably the same thing you're kind of
that's how I'm feeling. That's what I see too.
It obviously something that needs to be done, and we have to do it. It's just kind of like you feel like a little bit of a loss, a little bit of a change in the situations coming. That being said, I've actually actively asked around and talked to people and what they say, and nobody's come up to me. I mean, I've come to people to ask them about it, and basically the only thing anybody asks is, what about the traffic? What about the traffic? And that's the that's my major concern, because that's what people say over and over again. And I don't have it that much because of the time I come and go to work, but once in a while I leave right at the wrong time. And I went to pick up my dog over at Coventry over there, and I left at 5 o'clock, and it took me almost 30 minutes to get just to Tennessee Street in Redlands. And I shudder to think what it's going to be like when we have more of this there. But I think it's a good plan, and I think something that needs to be done. And so, and hearing not much, if any, objection to it, I can't see any reason to say no other than the loss of my small town feel.
What's kind of interesting, and this is just random, and I could be way off. We're kind of changing. We're changing the windows on our town a little bit. We're moving. We're building and we're recreating everything here in the center. And the campus transformation is huge, and it's becoming more modern, and it's growing and all that type of thing. And what used to be the prime kind of real estate up in the hills back behind that is not. I foresee will not be the prime real estate any longer. And now as we're looking to develop Area D, and we're putting in, nicer, bigger homes and things that are employees of the medical center, physicians, and people are going to want to purchase so they can be close to work and things like that. We're shifting the community a little bit. And I don't know, I could be way off on that, but that's just kind of how I feel. Not that necessarily there's a problem with that. It's just changing the overall how this was originally founded. Again, we are intrinsically tied together, and it is important that we support the medical center, and that is our brand. That's who we are here in the city. Just as long as I need to remind the administrators that there are still people that live here in the town, there are resources, there's things that we have to look out for, and so as we get down a little further into that. Those will definitely be discussion items that I will be interested in. All right. With that being said, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
No opposed, and the motion carries. So congratulations. With that being said, we have no other items. Correct? Anything from council that we want to?
I have one thing. I had a constituent call me on Sunday afternoon about a broken water line that I texted our city manager about. And he was asking me, who do you call if you have something like that? And I had to confess, I didn't know. So I told him, go on the website and look and see if you can find it. Well, he couldn't find anything on the website. I was wondering if is there any way we can put something on there, a number to call when you see, water spewing somewhere? I mean, he ended up calling.
Emergency on-call?
Yeah, he tried to call the sheriff department. They said call 911, and he said, I'm supposed to call 911 for water? And I said, well, it's a drought. They're going to arrest you if you wash your car. So,
yes, I'd be happy to put it on the city website.
Can we put on there something that people can call for that kind of thing?
Yes.
That's not emergent, but needs to.
And I actually went out there myself with my on-call guy because we can't find it. It turned out to be irrigation that came out during when the irrigation turned on.
Yeah.
But we have it fixed.
Just something there, so if somebody, because that would be my first thought, go on the website and see who I'd call. So.
I'm going to repeat a concern I've had for a while, and that is that, recently I've had to drive to a number of cities where they have on-ramps and off-ramps. Our Mountain View off-ramp is one of the worst now, and we had hoped we were fixing it, but
I think I saw Jarb out after you keep saying it. I saw him out on Sunday picking up wheat now.
As a matter of fact, I just called him again. It's email again yesterday, so yes. I took a picture and sent it again.
Yeah, but shouldn't they be on a schedule? Because that's...
It's supposed to be twice a week or twice a month. It's supposed to be.
Yeah, it's not happening.
Yes.
Either that or we've got super duper weeds that can grow awful fast. But I'm looking, and it's not only the weeds, it's, trash and it's just not looking good.
I understand they're striping tonight?
Yes, sir. They're striping Anderson.
Anderson and Redlands?
Redlands tonight, yes.
Oh,
And the slurry seal, that's just slurry seal that went on.
No, it's paved.
That's all new pavement?
Yes, grind the whole surface and overlay. And in the city, starting next fiscal year, we can continue going south from Court Street.
Oh, that's good. I think Anderson needs it.
Yes, so Anderson will be fixed. We're going to pave University from campus to Barton Road. So, and we
That'll be
widen
nice.
campus from University to Stewart Street.
Okay.
On the west side.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there'll be a lot more traffic going.
Yep. Well, we talk about traffic, I'm still concerned with this new campus in Barton parking structure, the ingress and egress, and that is going to be a nightmare. Especially when you got another parking structure with ingress and egress right next
You'll
door to it.
probably read about it in the next weekly report, but did you see we had another traffic fatality yesterday
Where was that?
on Barton in California?
Pedestrian?
It's hit and run. And it's,
So that's,
When's the plan to upgrade that Redlands Boulevard, California?
yes, it's in the work right now. As a matter of fact, I just had a meeting with the county flood control on Friday, this past Friday, for them to review and approve our design so we can finish up the design and then submit that to Fish and Game, Fish and Wildlife, and a U.S. Army Corps of Engineer. My goal is to start construction not this summer, but next summer. So,
And that's all on the backs of Loma Linda taxpayers.
yes, sir. Well, with the bond.
Redlands is kind of deadbeating on it.
Well, I'm still going to talk to them. And so what I did, talk to the county flood control and the city of Redland is for them to not charge us for the plan checking fee and inspection fee for both the county flood control and the
Part
city.
of that property is theirs.
Yes. In the part, the property is, the whole thing is in the county flood control, but it's in the city of Redlands. But it's
Right.
the land is actually belong to the county.
But they're too poor to kick in.
Yes,
And
because
that's a rhetorical question.
So it looks like they're doing some parking in there, is it valet parking, is that what it is in the new structure?
Valet parking, yeah.
They are doing valet parking on, and stop me if I'm wrong, Eric, on surface lots right now for the remainder of this week. Next week, they'll be starting in the structure?
No, we started in the structure
This week, okay.
Were you
And as
telling
part
me
of that,
60 valet parking attendants?
70.
I gotta say this, and it's the truth, because I deal with this all the time. I get phone calls from people that are irritated with traffic at schools, and, you know, gridlock. And the complaint is always somebody is going to get killed at a school because the traffic is just crazy. In reality, that's where you have the least amount of problems because of the gridlock. People can't drive very fast and nobody dies. So this might be a good thing, I mean, in reality.
Unless you're late getting to work.
Well, unless you're late getting to work.
In
You have to have
addition to
good,
the valets-
reasonable bosses.
Maybe I can ask.
Valets, there's traffic crossing guards at Barton and Anderson that are keeping people from crossing against the lights. And we've added 2 police officers during the peak hours to make sure we have a presence and correct those guys that need a little help getting where they need to go.
Provide a little report on the dirt moving operation. There could be a lot of truck moving dirt from the site, both sides.
How does that damage how does that affect the roads? Are they not heavy enough really to do that, or is it?
It's the 2 operations. One is to remove the dirt from FMO, parking structure, so that the truck traffic will go east on Barton Road, north on Mountain View, and left westbound on Van Leuven, and dump the dirt at the field, at the Orange Grove and Academy. That's field. Now, that's supposed to be a 2-day operation, and it's supposed to start after 9 o'clock and end by 3 o'clock. That's the first FMO. The second dirt operation is from the new hospital site itself. They come out of Anderson and go west on Barton Road and north on Waterman to the freeway, and use the same route coming back. So that one gonna take a little while longer because there's a lot of dirt coming out of that the hospital site. So
Are they keeping the dirt?
no, they're selling it. Yes, but except for the FMO, they're gonna keep those dirt.
Brings up another thing real quick, final. The groundbreaking ceremony on May 22nd, that, I don't know if you all got invitations as council members. Fortunately, Ovi, Councilman Popescu's brother and my best friend is getting married that day. Yes, May 22nd. Yes. I know, that's even more shocking than actually. Yeah, Lauren is getting married, so I know Ovi and I definitely have the wedding, and I believe the mayor was invited to the wedding too, and I'm not sure who else, but so just at I believe the Romanian church.
I think I'm out of town too, so I think our most distinguished member of the council is going to have to represent us all.
And I don't remember getting an invitation.
That never stopped you before?
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, I didn't want anybody to think that we were, trying to avoid it or anything, but I'm the best man, so if I sneak out, it wouldn't be good. Yes, yeah, it's a girl from New Zealand.
Big time.
All right, well, that concludes our council meeting. Thank you. Good night.